presentation between DEP, the Water Board, and our rate consultants at Amawak Consulting Group. So we're going to take you through some highlights from DEP from the last year, and then we'll walk you through a financial update, and we'll walk you through what we're proposing to the Water Board to do with respect to the wholesale water rates charged north of the city. So I'm going to hand it to Mikkel Adgate now.
Thank you, Omar. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us to hear the presentation, as well as to those of you who will be providing testimony, whether verbal or written. This is a public hearing of the New York City Water Board on wholesale water rates to take effect beginning July 1st, 2022. We are holding this meeting pursuant to state executive order permitting virtual public meetings as a public health precaution. First, we would ask that everyone place their phone on mute in order to limit the background noise. I have placed several documents in the official record, including a notice appointing me as the hearing officer, verified copies of the public notices placed in newspapers, a copy of the rate consultant's report on the regulated wholesale rate, and copies of the written testimony received by the board so far. The rate consultant's report is available on the Water Board's website, as is a copy of the presentation you will be hearing today. This meeting is being recorded, and once prepared, an audio recording and transcript of the meeting will be made available on the board's website, which you can find at nyc.gov/nycwaterboard. Again, that's nyc.gov/nycwaterboard. For members of the public who have difficulty hearing, there is a real-time text captioning feature available to follow up with the meeting. You can link to the captioning service from the public hearing notice under the meeting tab of the board's website. The program for this morning includes two sections. First, the Department of Environmental Protection will make a presentation. Then, members of the public will have an opportunity to make a statement. We do have Jonathan Golden from the Water Board with us today, so thank you, Jonathan, for joining.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
We are also joined by the Water Board's Treasurer, Omar Nazem, and by the board's rate consultants with the Amawak Consulting Group, Ed Marcus and Sham Lin, as well as many staff members from the Department of Environmental Protection. Now, I'm going to hand the hearing over to the board's treasurer. Omar?
Good morning. So as I mentioned, we're going to tag team this with Amawak. You're going to hear from me a little bit at the beginning. I'll take you through what's happened with the agency in the last year and some of the highlights. And then I'll hand it over to Amawak, and they'll walk you through some of the numbers and what we're proposing to the board should be done about wholesale rates for the next fiscal year starting July 1st, 2022. The presentation material I'm going to walk everyone through is on the board's website, which is nyc.gov/nycwaterboard, all one word, nycwaterboard. If you go to the website, there's an announcements section on the right. If you click the hearing notice for the hearings outside the city, you'll pull up the notice, and there's a link to the presentation materials. It'll open up the presentation file. Also on the board's website, under the rates section, is a markup of the rate schedule. That's the rule book, the list of charges and billing policies and actual numerical rates that is the proposed set of policies for next year. So those two documents are really what you want to be reviewing in terms of what we're proposing to do with the wholesale rates. So I'm going to start with slide number 1 of the presentation. I think most people on the call are frequent attendees for these annual hearings, but for anyone who isn't familiar, the purpose of today's presentation is to propose increases to the water rates we charge to municipal customers and water districts north of the city. The city's water system is a far-flung operation. We are a substantial landholder north of the city and a substantial owner of water supply assets that are used to collect, store, and convey water from north of the city locations into the city. That creates a convenient dynamic where if you are a community in between or amidst the water supply assets of the city, you have the opportunity under state law to request that the city sell you water from those assets, and the city is obliged under reasonable conditions to sell the water in exchange. It's a different financial configuration than what prevails in the city, where the city is a combined water and sewer sort of do-it-all utility company. In the arrangement we have north of the city, we sell kind of pure, raw, in a sense, untreated water from our assets to those communities, and it's a different rate setting, kind of a different rate framework and a different regulatory apparatus, because we're only providing water, we're not providing the sewer service, and we're not providing all the treatment we would usually provide in the city. So it's a bit of a different framework, and it requires a different kind of parallel rate setting and financial process than what we do in the city. We hold this public hearing each year to give the public a chance to hear from us in person about what we're doing, to get some kind of qualitative information as well as the numbers about what's happened, and to give the public a chance to speak up and let their thoughts be known, whether they want to do that verbally or in writing. This is a hearing where you have some of the most senior people involved in this activity. I'm here to listen and learn from comments or opinions folks may have. We posted notices of these meetings in the newspapers, and we provided an opportunity to pre-register. No one pre-registered to speak today, so we're going to go through the presentation at the end. Anyone who wants to kind of speak up is free to. They're also free to, if you can connect to this hearing or in general, to send written comments to us by email or in writing. You can email anything anytime at nycwaterboard@dep.nyc.gov. After this hearing, the next main event from an Upstate customer perspective is the board's meeting on June 1st, where the board will convene, it will meet, and it will vote on a budget and rates, including the rates chargeable to customers north of the city for the coming fiscal year. So I'm going to go to slide 2 now. The theme of this slide is really how we try to be a good wholesale partner, and it seems a little almost not needed. It seems almost unnecessary to say that we would need to be a good partner to our customers. But it's worth saying, because the arrangement with our customers outside the city is so different than what we have inside the city. And the city is in many ways, I say it to someone who's lived here for a long time but wasn't born here, is very different than other parts of the country and other parts of the state in terms of how we operate and how we do things sometimes. So I think it is worth saying we genuinely try hard to be a good partner to our communities who we sell water to, and where we have assets that are important located, and where we're doing construction projects from time to time, and need cooperation and kind of buy-in, and you want to be a good kind of construction infrastructure partner. The city's system is substantial in scope. We're serving nearly 1 million individuals north of the city with water service, in addition to the 8.8 million customers, substantially the entire city's population, who we sell water to in the city. We are the primary supply source to many communities north of the city, as well as a backup source if augmentation is required, or if there's a water safety concern in the community. We are there and available to provide water, not quite on demand, but almost on demand, in cases where it's needed for whatever reason, whether it's a primary supplier or an augmented supplier or as a backup supplier. We are as I mentioned, we are a substantial landowner north of the city and a substantial owner of infrastructure assets, and that makes us a substantial taxpayer outside the city as well. We pay nearly $170 million a year of property taxes throughout dozens and dozens of communities north of the city. We're often the largest taxpayer in these communities where we're located, and we're nearly always an important financial contributor to the communities. So I say that we charge for the water we sell, of course, but we also pay substantial property taxes to the tune of $170 million a year on those assets. The water board, which is kind of the named seller of water north of the city, is tied into the sort of legal financial structure of the city's water system, which is comprised of, in addition to the water board, the City of New York, which runs the utility company, the Department of Environmental Protection that actually runs the water and sewer, as well as a partner public authority agency, the Water Finance Authority, which sells bonds to investors and handles the Wall Street side of the operation. Those three entities, the city, acting through DEP, the board, and the authority, together are the triumvirate that kind of oversees the operations, the money, the legal side, and the rate setting of the city's combined water sewer utility and the water supply portion that it sells to these communities north of the city. We try to be a little. We don't try to be too hands-on or too activist, but we are there as a sort of, I don't want to say it, but I'll say a value-added partner when necessary. And I mentioned an example just on the slide. we hired a consultant several years ago to assist communities that wanted to speak up and wanted to help on a multi-year consulting engagement to identify kind of water revenue losses and kind of excess consumption, and to try and use rates and kind of construction work and just behavioral changes to kind of get to capture lost water revenue or get lost water under control. So I'm going to flip to slide 3 now. This is the theme of this slide is, I remind we're a large construction company at some level. We do over $1 billion of construction work a year, sometimes approaching $2 billion, and I mean hundreds of projects underway at any time. So it's a large operation. And I remind you that the point of the system at the end of the day is to sell water to customers safely and cleanly, and to make sure the used water, the refuse water, the wastewater is treated and sanitized for re-release into the system. And in from 2020 through today and for decades before, the water and sewer service continued uninterrupted, unimpeded, no safety or operational concerns that impeded the flow of water, the treatment of wastewater in any way. And that's an accomplishment for any system of this scale. But given the challenging operational environment the last couple of years we've seen here, it's something I think I really want to call attention to. And the agency's 6,000 personnel all played a huge role in that, in making sure the water was there to buy and the wastewater was treated safely. Not all systems nationwide can say that, so I think we should. I'm proud of the agency, and we did an excellent job operating under very difficult conditions the last few years. We do have some challenges as an agency coming out of the pandemic. Headcount is below where it should be according to our budget. We have a lot of personnel gaps where we need to hire. We have some titles where the workforce is aging, a lot of folks in near retirement. We need to hire that next generation of successors in to take up the hundreds of different job titles we have. On the financial front and the water billing front, we had a big achievement, a big computer system achievement. I also want to call attention to, which for a government is a big deal. We replaced our old IBM Pricewaterhouse billing system we'd installed in the 90s with a state-of-the-art itinerant Microsoft Dynamics product called UMAX, which went into service in September 2021 and is the billing engine for all the system's water bills right now. And it was a major system upgrade. It was the biggest financial software upgrade of the agency in 25 years, and it was done during the pandemic. So, and it started out and had very modest hiccups when it went live on September 7th, and it's issuing the bills, and the money is being collected, and the customers getting the bills. They're enhanced bills. They're more informative. They're visually more pleasing. There's a lot to, it was a big success. You don't hear computer software system upgrade success usually in connection with the government, or often in connection with the government. This was a big success. So that's another thing we were all very proud of the agency for getting done last year. And then I'll mention just one construction project that I think is on everyone's mind is work on the Delaware Aqueduct Bypass Tunnel is continuing. That's a huge project. It's been in the headlines for many years. It's the biggest repair project in the history of the city's vast water system. DEP is coordinating the work on the timetable for this tunnel shutdown, along with the affected municipalities outside the city, as well as our numerous regulators, to make sure the supply of water is sufficient and uninterrupted and of a suitably high quality to all the communities in the city during the shutdown phase of the project. Sorry, so I'm going to go on to slide 4 now. The point on this slide is we have a large capital budget. It's grown over the years. It's about $25 billion now in the most recent published numbers from March of 2022. So it's a very large project. The one point I do want to make is, and this is kind of a testament to past success, the part of the budget that's allocable to water supply projects has declined in recent years, and that's because so much of the spending in the early 2000s and the 90s was on water supply projects. Water supply was a much larger portion of the capital budget. If you go back even as recently as 2009, it was north of 20%. And it's kind of shrunk down now because of all the good work that was done in the past. And the city's focus is turned to think more boring projects in a sense, more things like sewer work and just replacing old water mains and state of good repair work on our wastewater treatment plants in the city. As a result of that, the growth in the capital plan has really not been on the water supply side, where the assets are of a high quality, were a lot of them upgraded in the 90s and 2000s, and where the needs for growth in the budget are more prosaic in city types of issues. So that's slide 4. I'm going to flip to slide 5 now. This is something I don't think will be a surprise to anyone who's been reading the newspapers, but interest rates are rising. Interest rates fell a lot during the pandemic. The government took action to try and stimulate the economy through making lending and borrowing more attractive. And rates have started to rise very sharply, especially short-term rates in the fourth quarter last year, and that's continued up through the present. The rates are still not high compared to pre-pandemic borrowing rates. And if you did this chart out, 30 years, I mean, the cost of borrowing is still pretty reasonable for anyone who remembers the days of 15 or 20% interest rates. And there may be someone on the call. But the fact the rates are rising does mean we're going to face higher borrowing costs than we did last year, particularly on our variable rate debt, and that's going to be an added cost to the system. Nothing unmanageable, but it's a market-wide phenomenon we're seeing. We're showing government bonds here, we're showing municipal bonds, and the rate rise has been very dramatic over a short period of time. Still very affordable borrowing costs, still not particularly high in the scheme of the history of interest rates, but it has been a very dramatic rise in rates since the fourth quarter of last year. Going on to slide 6, this again, I think everyone's experiencing this every day. The rate of inflation for basic consumer goods and services is at a level in terms of percentage that no one's seen since the early 1980s. You're seeing that at the gas pump, you're seeing that at restaurants, you're seeing it at coffee shops. It's broad-based and widespread, and I won't say you're seeing it in rents and house prices, but it's there too. So this is something we're watching. If market-wide inflation is rising, it's going to hit our budget at some point. We haven't seen too many dramatic signs of it yet. We have a lot of our costs tied up in long-term contracts, but if market inflation increases, it's going to hit our budget, and that's going to come into rates in some way, shape, or form in the future. And then the last slide, slide 7, before I hand it over to our rate consultant at Amawalk, Ed and Sean. I touched on this a little bit before, but we charge rates under a different legal financial framework north of the city than we do in the city. And there are 2 rates. The 2 rates are there because of an ancient state law that is still on the books and has been a suitable framework for a long time. So that's why we do it, because the law says we have to. But we have one rate, which is the allowance quantity rate or the regulated rate that we charge on all the water used in each town up to a threshold. That threshold amount is doubly variable. It's based on the population of the town multiplied by whatever the per capita water consumption happened to be in the city of New York in that month. And so the thresholds move around from month to month, and they're different from community to community based on population, based on how much water was used in New York City on a per capita basis in the month in question. Anything up to that threshold amount for that particular town gets charged one rate, the regulated rate, the allowance quantity rate, sometimes called the entitlement rate. Anything over that gets charged a second rate, which is generally called the excess rate, sometimes the rate on quantities of water charged in excess of the allowance amount. But for that reason, there's that threshold concept in state law. We have to have the one rate, the kind of tier 1 rate, and then the tier 2 rate. The last thing I'll mention on the slide is just water consumption trends. We saw an increase in water consumption in fiscal year 2021 by wholesale customers of 1.6% compared to the prior year. That's probably in part is fewer people commuting to the city, more home office work persisting even fiscal year 21. And this year to date, wholesale water consumption is 5% lower through March than the year before. A lot of that I would expect due to people kind of returning to the office and that work from home format phasing out in some workplaces. So that's the update from the DEP Water Board side. I'm going to hand it over to the Amawalk folks now, and they can take you through slide 8 and the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Omar. Good morning, everyone. This is Ed Marcus of Amawalk Consulting. I'll speak first, and then my colleague Sean Lynn will read a statement into the record when we get to slide 10. With slide 8, as noted in the top there in the title, DEP is proposing a 1.4% increase to the regulated rate and a 4.9% increase to the rate charged on quantities used in excess of the regulated rate. The impact of the 1.4% increase in the regulated rate is to increase the rate per million gallons to $2,083.48. The effect of the increase in the excess rate of 4.9% would result in a rate per million gallons of $5,617.46. Just like to add also a note on Upstate wholesale delinquencies. There was a small increase in delinquencies beginning in 2019, which was actually before the pandemic. Thus far, delinquencies have not impacted the rate increases, but any growth in wholesale delinquencies could lead to higher rate increases in the future. There's currently no allowance in the regulated rate for delinquencies by wholesale customers. Also like to note that delinquent wholesale customers have to pay interest on overdue amounts at a rate equivalent to the highest applicable rate on delinquent property taxes owed in New York City, which will be 18% per year for fiscal year 2023. We can move to slide 9, please. Slide 9 shows the components used in the calculation of the proposed regulated rate for fiscal year 2023. The largest category is water supply O&M expenses that exclude personnel, so all expenses other than personnel, $307 million. There are three major components to that. As Omar had mentioned, the largest component is property taxes paid to upstate communities, school districts, fire districts, and so forth. That's over 50% of the expenses that are other than personnel at about $170 million. Two other categories of note are $42 million for activities that are related to filtration avoidance. And there's also $23 million of an allowance in there for the Delaware Aqueduct shutdown project. Debt service expense, $242 million, a combination of both debt service on outstanding obligations as well as projected debt service on future bonds to be issued. Water supply personnel costs of $140 million, salaries and wages, as well as fringe benefit and pension costs. The other components are listed here on slide 9. Total expenses for water supply as projected for fiscal year 2023 are $813.7 million. That forms the numerator of the calculation for the unit rate. The denominator is the projected total water supply, which is 390,551 million gallons. That is a combination of both in-city as well as upstate consumption. It results in a unit cost per million gallons of water supplied of, again, $2,083.48. Moving to slide 10, as Omar mentioned at the outset in slide 1, the upcoming events would be the Water Board meeting on Wednesday, June 1st to vote on the budget and the final rate. And now I'd just like to briefly turn over to my colleague, Ms. Sean Lynn, who will read a statement into the record regarding our analysis and report.
Thank you, Ed. The NYC Consulting Group is here today to testify regarding the report on the cost of supplying water to upstate customers for the 2023 rate year that was prepared by the firm. For the record, we wish to state that the report was prepared in accordance with the methodology that was approved by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. The proposed regulated rate for fiscal year 2023 is $2,083.48 per million gallons, which represents an increase of $28.85 per million gallons relative to the existing rate of $2,054.63 per million gallons. The increase in charges over the current rate will be $2.02 for the entire year, or less than a penny per day for a single family residence using 70,000 gallons of water per year.
That concludes our testimony and presentation. Omar?
Thank you very much, everyone. Now I'm going to begin the public testimony portion of the hearing, starting with the pre-registered speakers, after which I will ask the general audience if anyone else would like to comment. At this time, we don't have any registered speakers, so if you are someone who would like to comment, I would ask that you first identify yourself, and then we'll go in the order that people call out. Is there anyone who would like to comment? Okay, hearing none, that concludes our hearing for today. The board will be returning for its next business meeting on Wednesday, June 1st at 1 p.m., when the board will consider and vote on the proposed rate and its budget for next year. Thank you and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.